All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this final step in the PBB implementation process. My computer is taking a second to switch over to full screen. So you all are aware that we are getting ready to launch into the final peer review process of the priority-based budgeting implementation. You all have successfully completed the program inventory identification and cost allocations and department scoring. And if I could get my screen to switch over, that would be really helpful. I'm just going to keep going until it decides to cooperate. But
Liz, can you get a little closer to your microphone?
Sure.
Thanks.
Our goals for today are to discuss the process of peer review and to get the template introduced to you all. And I apologize for this delay here. Let me see if I can make this. Well, we're just going to click, maybe not. Give me 1 second and let me see if I stop sharing, if I can get it to come back to life, and then we'll be ready to get going. All right. It switched over to full screen as soon as I stopped sharing, so I think my computer is just taking a second to accomplish this task. But I know you all have been, most of you have been a part of the department scoring process. So just a reminder that the step that we are taking now follows the result identification, where we pulled the information from your strategic plan and created results. Then you, as department experts, went through and scored your programs as subject matter experts for your department. Now we are switching over and we are going to ask you to go through and validate the scores that the departments made for their programs as subject matter experts for a result area. So you all have each been assigned to a result area, and you will become the expert for that result area. Following that, your super users and the leadership team will go through and just make sure that the scores that peer review returns make sense, and they will follow up with any corrections that need to be made or any further information that needs to be determined. There, I think it's finally caught up with me. Okay, just a reminder as to why we go through each of these steps. By defining the priorities, we create transparency and consistency. Each and every program is going to be scored against the same results, whether it's the community side or the governance side, and then each will be scored against the basic program attributes. You all know the most information about the services within your own department. So we ask that you go through first and assign value to those services through scoring. And then we have the opportunity for increased transparency and fairness by introducing the peer review process. Again, at the end, mistakes are recognized and corrected, and additional input it's determined if that's needed in order to finalize the scores and save the model. What those final scores will help us do is to determine whether or not the services are in high alignment with your priorities or if they're in a lower alignment with your priorities. We take that information and assign a quartile to each one of the services. So those that are in less alignment fall into quartile 4. Those with the most aligned fall into quartile 1. I want to reiterate that falling into a lower quartile does not mean that the service is no longer necessary. It's just a suggestion that perhaps that service could be offered in a more efficient way so that some of those resources could be reallocated towards a service that is in higher alignment with your priorities as a city. Okay, so we've gone through subject matter experts for programs. We're switching over to subject matter experts for results. And that's where we're going to start diving into why we go through this peer review process. So first, we do this to gain understanding of the services throughout the city. So you all have been assigned to a cross-functional team based on result area, where you will be evaluating and validating the scores for services from other departments. You'll begin to understand more what other departments are doing and how they're spending their time and resources. This adds transparency to the process as well, just by saying, you know, a department director might feel a particular attachment to the service the way it's being run currently. By putting it through a peer review process, we can validate whether or not the service level is indeed the most efficient and successful way to offer that service. This adds consistency and fairness and provides you all the opportunity to provide input across the city's service inventory. So here are the teams that have been assigned. I know that you all have been in communication with Lisa and Megan and Morgan regarding your position on one of these results teams or peer review teams. What we're going to ask that you do is, I think most of these are teams of 3, there's a few teams of 4, but within your team, you need to nominate or volunteer a team facilitator. That team facilitator is going to be responsible for setting up the meetings. We recommend 3 meetings, and we'll get into that a little further down the road. We're going to ask that the team facilitator be the one responsible for following up to gather more information if necessary. And then that team facilitator will also be responsible for the final score sheet. So each team will submit one final score sheet back to Lisa, Megan, and Morgan. So just that's the team facilitator's responsibility, is just to kind of keep things moving forward and then to submit that final score sheet. When you meet, these are just 3 good ways to get started. The template will actually organize all of the services by rank, starting with those with the highest scores. So we recommend that you go ahead and view that template in the way that it defaults, starting with the highest scores, and first identify the ones you agree with. Once that's done, you can get into the meat of the other services where you all have questions or you need more information. So that first meeting, just note the ones where you need to have further discussion or you need more information. Following that, you can determine whether or not you need to go back to the department director or the person from the department who had done the scoring and get more information. It could be that you have all the information you need and you don't need to follow up. That's great too, but that's what those meetings are there to determine, is whether or not you need more information to help you validate or change the score. As you get started, I believe we will be delivering templates to you all on Monday. So before you get started, one thing you can do is to become really familiar with the result and definition you are responsible for. Then to look through the service inventory. Again, you will either be evaluating community if you're on a community result, or governance if you're on a governance result. If you're on a BPA, you'll be covering the entire spectrum of services. But to just read through the service inventory and the service descriptions so that ahead of time you know what it is that you're going to be working with. It will just help for you to be familiar with the result and the services before you go into that first meeting. As you begin to look at the template, just determine if the score makes sense based on the definitions within your result area and that service's influence on achieving that result area. One of the things that the team facilitator is responsible for is to follow up and ask questions if you need to. Some of the reasons why you would follow up with a department director is if you don't understand what the service is or does. If you don't agree that the service influences the result area you're responsible for, or if you don't agree that the score assigned has the same impact that the department score believed it did. So during that first meeting, decide if you agree on it, great. If you would recommend a change, great. Then determine from those where you've recommended a change, which ones you need to follow up on. Some things that we don't ask that you do during the peer review process is don't try to assess a service on another result. We have, Lisa and Megan and Morgan have spent a lot of time identifying the teams, and so you are on a result area, and that is your area of expertise. We're going to dive back into the tips that we discussed for scoring because they'll work well for peer review. And then just to remind you that this is a chance for you to learn more about what your city does as a whole. And so to try to keep the mindset of this is a good exercise to understand how everybody within your organization is approaching their service to the city. So the first tip is to read it out loud. So go through and read through each one of your definitions and apply that to the service description as you are trying to determine its relevance to the result area. If the service has an influence on most of the definitions, then if it's been given a higher score, that's probably valid. If it's been given a lower score, you might revisit. Just keep in mind that a service that is essential to one definition and not to the others may still deserve a high score, so just make sure you keep that in mind as you're evaluating the scores in front of you. Second tip, in a world where the service disappears, would it make it harder or impossible to achieve that result? So if yes, we're looking for those higher scores. If no, a 1 or a 2. If there's no connection, then a 0. Again, a reminder, you're not there to revisit the results and the definitions and to determine whether or not you all have identified those correctly. They've been identified, they've been finalized, so we're just going to work with what's there. We're not going to redefine any results or change the definitions. We're not assessing the relevance of the service overall, and we're not looking at the service's influence on any of the other results or the costs or efficiencies within that service. Just a reminder, each one of those services is potentially going to be scored against 12 or 13 result areas, whether that's community plus BPA or governance plus BPA. So, changing a score or recommending the change of a score is not going to be the life or death of a service. So just be true to your team's determined validation of the score. And, if you all as a team determine that the score needs to be changed, then that's okay. That service is going to, it's not going to spiral it to the bottom or rocket it to the top. Okay, as far as just kind of the methodology behind peer review, are there any questions before we dive into kind of the step-by-step?
Not seeing any questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so Lisa created for you all a checklist that is, I think, very, very detailed and helpful as you get through this process. So we recommend 3 meetings, each one block off about 90 minutes. So you may not use it, but I think that will give you ample time to have meaningful discussion. Again, in that first meeting, Be very familiar with your result and definitions going into it. Try to be familiar with the services on the template. And then first off, identify those services that you agree with. Once you've done that, then you can begin to look at the services where you disagree or where you need more information. In that second meeting, discuss any additional information that the team facilitator can bring to the table from the departments. This information can be gathered through conversation, through email, through phone call, but just that will be the added benefit of that second meeting, is to have that additional information. For the third meeting, it's time to have a consensus on all of the scores so that you can save your template and send that back to Lisa and Megan. Just some ways to approach the data. So I have taken 2 services out of your inventory, and these are both services that scored a 4 in the result area of healthy residents. One of the things that we ask that you do is to look for consistency. So I picked these 2 randomly, and you will have both the description and the department comments in order to help you determine if this score of essential to healthy residents is in fact relevant and correct. So you can read through the description to determine if adult daycare is essential to healthy residents based on the definitions provided. Then you can determine if jail services is essential to healthy residents based on the definitions provided. But then look at the list of programs that have scored in the essential or 4 category and see if that's consistent across all the services. Does it make sense that both adult daycare and jail services scored as essential to healthy residents? That answer could be yes, that answer could be no, but that way you are viewing it as a grouping of services to see if it makes sense that they all have that same score and that same level of influence on the result area. Questions you might ask: do you need more information? Was the description ample enough for you to understand what the service does? Were the comments helpful in understanding why the score assigned was chosen? Do you understand all of the pieces of the program name to know exactly what it is that you are looking at? A quick example from the city of Duluth. This was their business continuity and disaster recovery service with the description of planning and testing of business continuity plans. This is one of their governance results, and these are one of their governance services, and these are their governance results. This service scored a 1 in compliance with minor compliance requirements to meet state audit requirements. Customer service, it scored a 2. In the event of a disaster, having a plan contributes to the continuance of customer service. Trust and transparency, it scored a 3. Having a functioning plan fosters trust and transparency by ensuring integrity of our systems. So each one of those descriptions after the score were comments that were left by the department scorer. So I believe that those descriptions were very helpful in the peer review process to help determine if that was a correct score. Finally, this high-performing org. This is another one of the results from their governance list, and it scored the same as this business continuity and disaster recovery service. Scored the same score as city council meals, awards and recognition, sublet repairs, graphics, and so it scored a 0 against high-performing org. And it's taking all of those services as a group and determining, does business continuity and disaster recovery fall into the same level of influence on the result area of high-performing org as these other services? Okay, moving into our demo, when we look at the template, just remember, each service must have a peer review score. Each one of those scores must have a value of 0 to 4. We cannot have text or symbols or anything or blanks in any of those fields or the template will not upload properly. In addition to that, should you add any columns or rows in order to help you organize the data, just please make sure that those are deleted before you submit your final score sheet. Any additional columns or rows will prevent the template from uploading properly. Okay, this is what a scorecard looks like. So this is the score that the departments gave to each one of their services. It will default to this score of highest to lowest. Any comments that you have as a peer review team can be left in this peer comments column. That way, when the super users and the leadership team are going back through and reviewing for final scores, any input that you have as to why you either recommended the change or why you kept it the same, you can put that information in the peer comments column. This column here is where you are going to enter your score. If you agree with it, you'll just put the same score in the peer review column. If you recommend a change, just enter the value that you are recommending, and that will be sufficient to move on. So I do have a scorecard from your organization. So this is the Healthy Residents Scorecard. Again, as you'll notice, we can look at this based on value. You can look at it as all of the 4s together, all of the 3s together, all of the 2s together. And again, you can view for consistency here. You can also view to see if you agree with it here. Any comments that you want to make can be made right over here next to the department comments. So again, we have the service description, the department comments, and then any comments you want to leave here. Just so this is, oh, one more thing, sorry. The next tab has the definitions. I know you all have your handy cheat sheets, but if you don't happen to have them handy, the definitions for each result area will be on your template on that second tab. So just so you all know, the peer review scores are the scores that are taken into the final scoring process. So it will be up to you all to determine the peer review score that then the super users and the leadership team will evaluate. They will have access to both the department scores and the peer review scores. They will be able to access any differentiation between the two so that they can review and confirm that the peer review scores are in fact the correct scores that they want to move forward with. Okay, I think that's all I have. I am happy to answer any questions before turning you loose for the rest of your Friday.
Can we use any of those blank columns to the right, sort of essentially work columns for the team? So if we wanted to sort of accumulate individual team member scores and then sort of roll them up into an average as a starting point, can we play with LM and some of those columns to the right, or is the spreadsheet essentially locked down so that anything we do, we're working sort of outside?
We do not lock down the template for that reason. So if you all want to add columns during the process, you can. We just ask that anything that you add, you delete before sending it back to Lisa and Megan. I know we'll run a cursory check to make sure that anything else has been deleted, but anything outside of the designed template will cause an error in upload. So feel free to make comments, keep notes, but anything that you add outside of the template, please try to remember to delete.
Just a process question. What's the rule for peer review comments? Like, are they only required in cases where you change the score? Or is it something we're recommending across the board?
Liz, did you get that?
I'm sorry, I missed some of that.
The question was, for peer review comments, is there a recommendation that the peer review team enters a comment anytime a score is changed, or it's a significant score change?
My recommendation would be a significant score change, simply because Lisa and Morgan and Megan they'll probably want to follow up if there has been something significant changed. However, if you have a specific reason for changing a score or for leaving a score, just a quick note so that the leadership team and the super users have that on record would be great. There is no requirement from our side that any comments be left, but just for expediting and making the final scoring process more efficient, I would recommend that you leave scores so that there's a trail back to your thought process.
Any other questions? If not, we can switch over to, we have a brief couple of slides from OMB that we can share with you guys, and then we're going to give you guys some time to meet up with your groups. There are some groups here that are completely, that everybody could attend on Friday, so we want to give an opportunity for you to meet and start setting up your calendar. Okay. Thanks, Liz. You're welcome to stay on if you'd like.
Yeah, Lisa, I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll be on mute in the background, so if you need me, I'm here.
Sounds good.
Thank you all.